Here's why Christianity makes less sense than all the other religions. God on Christianity became a human being. And to be a human being, you must have a body. And what bodies do is constrain the way that minds perceive things. I can only see in front of me because of the way that my physiology is. I have eyes in the front, not in the back of my head. So having this particular body constrains the way that I experience the world. But God is an unconstrained thing. He has no limitations. So what sense would it make to say Jesus, being God, took on a body? That would imply a contradiction, that an unlimited being took on limitations.
So firstly, this shows a lack of understanding of why Christ came down and took on flesh, why Christ came to earth and took on flesh. Perhaps this is an area where you might want to dive into a little bit deeper so you can understand why he actually took on flesh. And I would even argue that his limitations weren't necessarily connected to him taking on flesh. The only limitations that he experienced were things that he imposed upon himself because he came down as a servant, a humble servant, in order to atone for the sins of the world. He had to drink the cup that the Father had for him. And in so doing that, he relinquished a lot of his power that he had. This is something that he did upon himself. We read over in Philippians this idea of kenosis, what it means to self-empty or to self-empty himself. This is something that Christ did upon himself. He took away some of his power that he had and some of his glory that he had in order to accomplish the will of the Father. And I would even argue that the very fact that God has the ability to come on earth in the form of a man and able to intervene into the world as he pleases shows just how unconstrained he is and how powerful and how glorious he actually is. Moreover, we notice also in the Gospels when Jesus was here in his earthly ministry that he knew things and understood things that only God can understand. For example, he understands the very conditions of man's heart. So the very fact that Christ was able to do the things such as miracles and knowing the conditions of man's heart without anyone saying anything to him, these are only feats that God can do. And so this shows, if anything, this shows that he was absolutely unconstrained by the human flesh because he was able to do things that only God could do. So this idea that there's some kind of contradiction because God took on human flesh and sort of quote unquote constrained himself according to you, this is completely erroneous and nonsensical. So my recommendation would be to go back and study this understanding of why Christ took on flesh so you can better represent what the Christian thoughts on the subject matter.